3.
It's pot pie day. Who doesn't love a good pot pie in the winter seasons? We're gonna do it a couple of different ways. We're gonna do a veggie pot pie for the vegetarians and vegans that are watching, and also a chicken pot pie. But first, you might have seen me talking or at least posting about how good juices are for you. To build your immunity. I love my Berkeley mom. Hey, Steven. Wine glass here. And instead of wine, right now I'm drinking a combination of what's called the Flu Fighter that I got from Sprouts Restaurant in South Lake Tahoe, and I love it. Heavy on the ginger, which is good for our immunity, carrots, celery, apples, lemons, oranges, and ginger. It's so good. All right, so chicken pot pie day. You can see that I roasted the chicken last night, and today it was nice and cool, so I was able to debone the chicken. So this is all ready to go, and it's actually quite flavorful. And over here in my clay pot, thank you, Pampered Chef. This has been the best clay pot ever. I baked it again, the bones and all the rest of the veggies, for about 2 or 3 hours today on 325. And I'm gonna strain that for our filling, for the broth. So I have a combination. Pot pies you can make any way you want. You can have any kind of vegetable in it that you love. And so I've put the traditional vegetables in this, which is of course our onions, our celery, carrots, shallot. I've got some potato that's been peeled and cubed. I've got mushrooms because I love mushrooms. And then I have some greens, some mixed greens, baby kale, spinach, some asparagus, and down in the bottom I have some zucchini and yellow squash. So we're gonna assemble these and cook these, and we're gonna have the most delicious pot pie. On top, which is part of the best part, I mean, who doesn't love a good pastry? I love pastry. I'm gonna make a gluten-free biscuit. The reason why I'm going with biscuits is because pastry can get doughy if it's sitting around. And recently I started making my mom, hi Mom, Rachel Vigorino, pot pies with biscuit toppings because she loves biscuits. So I'm gonna try out this gluten-free flour, and the fat, of course, that you need in biscuit topping. We've got some coconut oil here for the vegans, regular butter if that's what you prefer. For seasonings, we're gonna go with a little bit more fresh sage, and then some herbes de Provence, which has thyme and rosemary and a little lavender in it. We're gonna braise our vegetables with brandy. Have you ever brandied your vegetables in your stews, your soups, or whatever you're making? It just adds such a nice layer of flavor. Let's get cooking. So there's really 4 parts to making a pot pie. If you're making a pot pie that has meat in it, you have to cook the meat. Particularly if you're doing a poultry pot pie, cook it well. Then you want to make your vegetable filling. So first I'm going to do this in order here. My onions, and I've got a couple scallions that were reaching the end of their life, so I'm going to throw that in there. Pot pies and soups and stews are a great way to use up the vegetables that you've got. So I'm going to add the normal celery, carrots, onions, shallots, green onions, and we're going to saute these veggies for a few minutes, and then we'll continue to add them in order as they need to for cooking. Potatoes can go in as well. And one of the secrets that when I'm cooking, not just for myself, but for others that are necessarily not practicing vegetarianism, and they do want the regular recipes, I will do something like this. So I've got double the amount of vegetables that are going to go in both pies, the veggie pie and the regular chicken pot pie. And then I will take out the filling that I'm going to put in the veggie pie, and then continue with the meat pie. All right, so again, remember the layering as you're cooking. So a nice generous helping, because this is a lot of salt and pepper. I love the coarse ground black pepper, it's my favorite. I've got dried parsley because, let's face it, we can't find fresh right now. I do have fresh sage. We'll throw that in there. And then a teaspoon or so, probably 2 teaspoons of the herbes de Provence. which I love. Gosh, it's so good. I started with a couple tablespoons of vegan butter since this is also going to be vegan, and a little bit more of that Thrive oil, which you can use when you're sauteing. Extra light olive oil. Regular extra virgin olive oil is not for high heat cooking, it'll smoke. I have this on medium-high heat, so we want to use an oil that will stabilize that way and not smoke out the apartment and set the alarm off, right? These apartment alarms are such a pain. Anyway, so I'm going to give this a couple more minutes here while I add the mushrooms. I love mushrooms. I think I might make y'all a cream of mushroom soup, a vegan cream of mushroom soup that's so good that you'll love with truffle oil on top. This is a pot that I bought for Jessica when she went to University of Connecticut, and I took it back from her because I love it so much. Now I'm going to take the greens off the top of this and start adding some of my other vegetables here and let those saute together. So I've got the asparagus and the squashes, a yellow squash and a zucchini. And we're going to give that a good toss. Let that get coated. We're going to let that cook. This is a lot of vegetables, but again, I'm making 2 different types of pies, and it will cook down, as we know vegetables do. You can add whatever vegetables you really love. You just want your basics, your onions, your carrots, your celery, and then be creative. Like I've said, be the author of your culinary domain. So we've added our other vegetables. They've cooked down a little bit. I've added a cup of frozen peas. Again, put your favorite veggies in here. And now I'm adding the greens and a little bit of heat with the paprika. I've just got to have it. I'm spoiled that way. Give it a little stir, incorporate it. You can add more greens, of course, if you'd like. Sneak in those greens in every chance you can get. And now, the secret ingredient. It's really an easy way to add a layer of flavor, and this is about $8 for this bottle of brandy. You can use sherry, you can use wine, you can use a beer if you wanted to. I like the way brandy caramelizes the vegetables. So I'm gonna let that cook for a couple of minutes while I put the biscuit dough together. Cooking has just been such a mainstay in my house. I can remember learning to cook before I could ride a 2-wheel bike. Not actually cook, but I learned how to roll meatballs as like a 2 or 3-year-old. I can remember my dad always wanting the kids in the kitchen to learn, and he was so smart for doing that. All of his children developed a love for cooking, and you really can tell the difference when someone really loves to cook and someone who doesn't really love to cook, and I hope this inspires you to love cooking. People can really tell the difference. Now, I've started our biscuit dough with our 2 cups of this gluten-free ancient grain all-purpose flour. Meanwhile, I've got a cup of our unflavored, you want an unflavored milk alternative to make this vegan. And you can, if you don't want it to be vegan or you don't care that much about it, kefir will help curdle this and turn it more into a buttermilk. If you want this to be 100% vegan, use the vegan butter here. Make sure it's extra cold. This is about 5 tablespoons of regular butter because vegan butter doesn't always agree with me. My body does better with a little bit of regular butter than vegan butter. Now I've taken the 1 cup of milk alternative or buttermilk if you're making this regular and regular flour. So you have lots of options here, right? And before I add that, however, I'm going to take my trusty tool here and I'm going to incorporate the butter in the flour. Anytime you're working on a biscuit, you don't want to over mix, right? You want to just get it incorporated, and actually you want it to be about the size of peas by the time we're done. So I usually end up going through it again with my fingertips, getting the butter out of here. And just taking these big chunks and just rolling them in your hands, and you'll separate the butter into littler pieces and incorporate that in your biscuit dough. Who doesn't love a good biscuit? I was raised in the South, and so biscuits are a staple in the South. I don't make them very often, but like I said, I was making them for my mom while she was going through some health issues, and she really loved the pot pie with the biscuit on top. Again, there's many options for your topping. So you have many options for your pot pie. It's like limitless, right? So we have our protein, which is chicken, and again, you don't have to roast the chicken whole like I did here and debone it and make your broth homemade. You can take shortcuts. I'm showing you the way that I would do it. However, there have been times I've made a chicken pot pie and I just bought a pack of breasts and cubed it up and just sauteed it on the stove top. So this is our biscuit dough, and I'm using a gluten-free, someone requested, and Vardy requested gluten-free, so I'm making a gluten-free one. You can use regular flour or gluten-free flour. If you are going to use a gluten-free flour, look for the healthiest option you can find. I like this because it is whole grain and it has flax in it, which is super healthy. Many gluten-free products are junky. It's just like white rice flour, tapioca starch, potato starch. So I'm going to give this one a shot for the first time. So I've got a couple cups of the flour in here, along with a tablespoon and a half of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt, and 5 tablespoons of butter. And I'm gonna make a little well, and I'm gonna add my cultured oat milk. So if you're gonna use a milk alternative, typically you would use buttermilk. I curdled it a little bit with kefir. If you are vegan, you wouldn't do that. You would just do lemon and about a tablespoon of lemon juice, fresh lemon juice. And I'm just gonna start pouring it in and stirring it together, incorporating it bit by bit around the bowl. And watch this incorporate and come together. I'm excited to see how this is gonna turn out. There will come a point in biscuit making and in any kind of dough where the hands must get involved. There's just no other way around it. So, but we don't want to overwork this dough. So just kind of fold them together like so, right? Incorporating the flour that's under, turning it over, and just getting it to where it's just incorporated. And then we will move on to the next step. Meanwhile, I have turned the vegetables off behind me. We don't want to cook them to mush. We just want to saute them, and they'll finish off within the pie. So here we go. Now with regular flour versus gluten-free flour, it's typically it holds together a little bit better. So I'm actually not going to roll this out like you would regular biscuits. I'm going to do it lazy girl way in just a second. I love my Cuisinart pans. I've had this pan 25 years. If you're gonna spend a lot of time in the kitchen, you gotta get the right equipment, right? So remember I said there's a few different components to a pot pie. Protein, if you want it, that must be cooked. Your vegetable filling must be cooked part way. Then you make your beautiful sauce that the veggies and the protein are gonna go into, and then the topping, right? So I don't put a crust on the bottom. First of all, we don't need that many calories and that much pastry, even though I love pastry. So it's gonna be a bottomless pot pie in a casserole dish with the biscuits on top. So right now I'm making a white sauce. So again, I don't digest the vegan butter very well because it's mostly made of oils. So in this case, I am gonna use regular butter. If you gotta go 100% vegan, use the vegan butter. I've got our gluten-free flour here. So a couple tablespoons of the butter, and about 1/3 of a cup of the gluten-free flour, and I've got it on medium heat. And in the South, we would call this making a roux. In the Midwest, they would say you're making a white sauce, and you can see that this has whole grain flour in it because of the color, which is good for us, by the way. So a little bit of fat, a little bit of flour, and we're just gonna cook this down a little bit. It'll reduce that floury taste by cooking it. And then we're gonna thicken it with our oat milk, unflavored, unsweetened oat milk. And that'll be just another step in our gorgeous pot pie dinner tonight. Now I'm adding my, if you want to use milk or buttermilk or whatever you've got for your milk, to the pan. With my whisk, I'm going to incorporate it together and get those lumps out. I'm going to turn the heat down to low because this can thicken up on you pretty quickly. Now, I'm making the chicken pot pie right now with this batch. And so once that I have all of the clumps worked out with my whisk, and you want to do this quickly, and this pan was pretty hot. It looks like it's coming together nicely. The flour clumps are breaking down. Oh, this is going to be so good. I've strained my chicken broth, and I'm going to start adding my chicken broth to this. I like the filling, the sauce part of the filling is probably my favorite part of, besides the pastry. Who doesn't like gravy and pastry? So now I'm going to turn it up just a tad. During the part where you're making the roux, you really got to watch the heat. Maybe I'll make y'all some gumbo and show you how to make a real deep Cajun roux that you have to hover over for about 45 minutes. So I've never used this flour before. This is an experiment, and we shall see how well it blends. And we'll take this, we'll add it to the pot with the veggies, we'll add our chicken, and then we'll be ready to assemble with the biscuits on top in just a minute. The only thing that's missing are my kids. Oh, I love you, Jessica. I love you, Stephen. I love you, Serena. All right, it's incorporating well. I'm just gonna season this. As I said, I like to season in layers. I got some parsley here. And again, just for the heck of it, a little paprika. And it looks like our experiment has worked really well. I did add a little bit more broth to it. It's really incorporated very well. I tasted it, it tastes delicious. So I'm now gonna take this and I'm gonna add it right here to our pot of veggies. I took out the veggies that I'm gonna use for my vegan pot pie later. So we know that this is a gluten-free pot pie. And as I was telling you, now you can see how beautiful that's gonna be. And we're gonna add some chicken to that. Oh yeah. Somebody's gonna be really excited in a little bit. My cameraman here is starving. So I test it out in the pan first so I can see, do I need to add more broth? Do I need more filling? Do I need to add more chicken? What does it need? Now the vegetables will continue to cook and release some of their liquid in the oven. So you don't have to worry about it getting too thick on you. Actually, what I probably will do is add a little bit more broth. And by the way, look at this broth. Now we're paying what? $6, $7 for a little thing of bone broth. I've been making bone broth for 30 years. We just didn't call it that. Every time I ever cooked a chicken or roasted a turkey, I save the bones and I roast them. Roasting them adds a depth of flavor. It's unbelievable the difference that you will taste in roasting versus boiling, right? So that's what I love to do. I'm gonna add a little bit more of that broth here. Victor's already drinking it. Is it good? He likes it. He's nodding. He says yes. So it looks to me like we are ready to roll.
Ew.
Yummo. We've assembled this now by adding the chicken, the vegetables, the sauce together, and we even put this all in the pan. And what's great is that this is cooked already, right? Because we cooked the chicken, we've cooked the vegetables, so you can taste it at this point and see what it needs. And it actually needed a little bit more salt and pepper, which I added. Also, the biscuits are ready to go. I added about a teaspoon of fresh chives. I added about a teaspoon of dried parsley and a teaspoon of my herbes de Provence. Now, because this isn't as stable of a dough, because it's gluten-free flour, I'm just gonna shape my biscuits. I'm not gonna go through the hassle of rolling the biscuit dough out. And again, for your topping, so I'm just gonna make little cylinders like this and kind of depress the center a little bit, because otherwise they like to puff up with the baking powder that's in here. And this has flax powder in it as well, and that's also a bit of a leavening agent. So I'm just gonna quickly make these and tell you that your options for your topping are limitless. You can do store-bought pie crust or puff pastry. Puff pastry is the good one. Your homemade puff pastry, which is not easy to do, but for those bakers out there, certainly go for your homemade puff pastry. You also, if you want to skip any kind of flour at all, you can make mashed potatoes. And if you're not a vegan or vegetarian, you can put some cheddar cheese in your mashed potatoes. I mean, there's really lots of options. You can even do it crustless altogether and just bake it as is. So really, food is an art, and cooking, you learn what you like. And so when people ask me all the time, how did you learn to be such a good cook? I said, well, I've been doing it a long time, and I always have. And my favorite gatherings in my life are always around breaking bread with one another, whether it's family or friends or strangers that I haven't met yet that become my friends over a meal. And so I hope you enjoy being in the kitchen and preparing for your family, because they will know how loved they are. You don't have to be a great cook for your kids to know how loved they are, but they really do appreciate when you put the effort in. I know I'm blessed because my kids always appreciated me for the things that I would make them at their request. The final step before popping it in the oven is taking your butter or your vegan butter and brushing your handmade biscuits, drop biscuits, some people like to call them. You just want to make sure that you depress the middle of them. And by the way, they will grow together and form a nice topping. I made this a couple weeks ago, although it wasn't gluten-free or vegan, for Nacco Bear and Medicine for the People. I hope you all tag him in this, and brought it to his concert and fed his band and the crew. So this is what it looks like, and then we're gonna bake this at a 400-degree oven until it's bubbly. You might wanna put it on a sheet pan because it will bubble over possibly because it's filled up pretty high, and bake it until the biscuits have risen and they're nice golden brown, probably about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, give or take, depending on your oven. Just keep an eye on it. When people say, how is it that everything turns out so well that you make? It's because I watch it, I hover over it. I put a lot of effort into it, and that's what it takes really to create something absolutely delicious and beautiful. And I hope that you'll enjoy this. And by the way, this isn't a one-man show. What is it that you want me to make? I already have a request from Kelly Love and Kendall, which is chicken marsala, so I'll make that this weekend. I've already promised a vegan lasagna, spaghetti and meatballs. What else would you like to see me cook and learn how to make? I know brisket's on the menu. My playa name, brisket. If I can find one, I'll make it, Paul Reeder. So thank you everybody for watching. A couple of announcements. We're still in the middle of this coronavirus scare, and we're all on lockdown here in California, and I believe it's probably going to spread throughout the country. Stay positive, everyone. Think about ways that you can bring positivity to the situation online, the people that you can talk to on the phone, the posts that you make on social media. Let's rise. This is a time of unity, of oneness, that we can all get through this together, and be on the lookout for offerings that Victor and I are going to teach some classes together, free classes, and just continue our friendships and our connection with one another even while we're hunkered down. And by the way, today is Sunday, and today is World Water Day. And what that is to recognize and acknowledge and make an impact for the 750 million people on our planet that do not have access to clean water. So when I'm done here, I'm gonna go onto my Mom's House for Children website and get some work done and pray and thank God that I live where I do, and that possibly together we can all make a difference for some people in the world. Take care. Hey there, friend. Teresa's Kitchen here. We've just been able to put up our first cooking video, vegan butternut squash soup. Check it out below. And again, It's not a one-man show. We're in this together. What is it that you would like me to make? If you've had dinner with me and you loved a particular meal, let me know what it is. We already have spaghetti and meatballs coming. We have lasagna coming. We have maybe some Italian wedding soup. We've got brisket, if I can find it, possibly gumbo, and a host of other recipes that are tested, tried, and true. So I hope you enjoy, and let me know what you'd like me to make.